kind of random.
What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is another Hip Hop Now podcast bonus episode brought to you by the producers of this podcast over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you're wondering to yourself, what's that all about? Well, the link is in the description of this episode. Support the podcast, receive goodies that are exclusive and timed exclusives. Now, so let's talk about it. So recently on Drink Champs, if you're from the future, you know what to do. You need to get your ass out of here because you already know what happened. But on an episode of Drink Champs, Nori referred to Sons of Man as flunkies, right? Now, I know some people were wondering where this conversation was coming from. Basically, this is the root of it, right? And this is what we're going to talk about. The viewpoint, and you know, in their defense, in Drink Champs' defense, they said it was taken out of context, but I don't know how it can be when you say flunkies. But nevertheless, he was insinuating, in my opinion, that no one cares about anyone outside of the Wu, especially Sons of Man. Now, this attitude isn't something new. It's only something new to those people who were into the Wu-Tang affiliates. For kids who are listening to this podcast, let me take you down memory lane, right? Wu-Tang Clan dropped as a group. Into the 36 Chambers dropped, undoubtable classic in 1993. And soon after that, we learned that a number of the artists on the group or in the group had solo deals, right? So you knew Method Man was dropping an album, and you knew GZA and Raekwon and ODB and all of them. So it was like this force of Wu-Tang storming the hip hop industry, right? Not only with their music as a group, but now you had this Wu-Tang sound. Staten Island was on the map as Shaolin, you know what I'm saying? Thanks to the Wu. All these solo projects dropping, and in the beginning, the Wu not only dropped a classic group album, but a number of the solo albums were also considered classics by most hip-hop fans. But with something great and something new in anything, people tend to copy, or so we think. And it kind of became a thing that not only was there the Wu, right? And when I say copy, I'm really talking about the record industry as a whole, not necessarily the artists. But they became this thing where people wanted more from the Wu. Because what happens is once you get this much talent coming out of one place where there hasn't been many, right? Now everybody kind of rhymes like that, right? Like, remember, Nas and Mobb Deep hit big, put Queensbridge back on the map. All of a sudden, anybody from Queensbridge was a possible, if you could rap, you would probably getting signed because everybody wanted that flavor from Queensbridge. You know what I'm saying? So the same thing existed for Staten Island and the Wu, right? People couldn't get enough of the Wu-Tang Clan. So then you got Wu-Tang affiliates, meaning artists, groups that were not necessarily in the group Wu-Tang Clan, but were somewhat co-signed by the group, whether they came from the same projects or they were affiliated in one way or another, right? So you had people like Shaheem, who was like the little cat, you know what I'm saying? Something you never seen in the Wu, a little kid who could spit, right? Killer Priest, who's like nothing you heard in the Wu, or a combination of rappers from the Wu, maybe a little Jizza mixed with some Inspector Deck, little Master Killer in there. And he was from Brooklyn. But you also had Sons of Man and Killer Army and on and on and on. Back then, most people that I know did not really care for the Wu affiliates because it felt like knockoff Wu-Tang Clan. Like, why would you want more of the Wu when there's so many of them? You could just stick to the people who are in the group because they're going to be releasing stuff. Even though they were co-signed by the Wu in one way or another, only some of them were able to actually make some noise. In my opinion, that would be Shaheem and Killer Priest, right? Again, this doesn't mean that all the other groups or whatever are whack. It just means that most hip hop fans would rather have a Jizza album, would rather have an Inspector Deck debut, not the one that got released, the one that burned up in the fire. Most people didn't really want the Wu affiliates. Now, don't get me wrong, some people didn't care. If it was Wu affiliated, it was official to them. But I was one of those people who was like, nah, like, who are these cats? And I heard records, and honestly, Killer Priest and Shaheem were the ones that made the impression on me the most with their music, because they were just different enough from the Wu that having that Wu stamp was like a bonus, right? And look, there was a lot of people who felt that way, but apparently there were a lot of people who did not care. They wanted anything. If there was a new cat that was affiliated with the Wu, you know what I'm saying? And in any way, even if it's somebody like Papa Wu, people just wanted anything that represented that brand. And therefore you got groups like Sons of Man and Killer Army who saw a number of albums, and some of which a lot of people consider to be dope. But this is the thing, right? This is not as much about Wu-Tang affiliate flunkies, right? Because again, that point was just, to me, just means that Nori back then felt in a lot of ways the same way as I did and a lot of people I knew, right? Like, the Wu is enough. I can't get into these other cats because they have a Wu stamp on them, right? I already have enough with the Wu itself. And that's what Nori said trust me, it was not it was not uncommon at one point to feel that way. They had a niche audience. But where I think he was ignorant to the situation was Shaheem was making some serious noise, and so was Killer Priest. The others were more of if you want more Wu, you can get it. I will say this, recently, before this all happened, I did listen to Sons of Man's first album because I was curious, right? Hip hop Twitter will have you believe a lot of these records, a lot of these artists were more well known than they actually were. And sometimes we gotta remember, sometimes our circle will tell us that an album or an artist is great. There's certain albums, certain songs that are great to me and my friends. Like Nas's You Owe Me. I know there's a lot of people who do not like that record. But me and my friends got a special place for that record based off of a time when it dropped and we were mad drunk going down to DC to a club, and we played it like 20 times. I would never jump on any podcast or Twitter and tell people this is a bona fide smash. I mean, it was a good record for Nas, but it's not one of his biggest records as far as what people think about, right? But it was something that was special to me and my friends, and a couple of people who probably also liked it. The same thing goes for Killer Army albums and Sons of Man and anybody else you could think of that's a Wu affiliate or a flunky, according to Nori. But I think what people are missing in defending these Wu affiliates is the fact that that's just the way it goes, right? A group, a label launches and everything they drop is dope, and you're like, damn, I love this dude, and I love this chick singing, and I love this guy's rapping, and I love this dude for what he does, right? And it's all successful, it's all dope, it's all popular. It feels like a catalog all in itself, right, for a record label or a crew. But the minute you begin to step too far outside of the ones that make it what it is, it starts to dilute your experience, regardless of how you feel about their music. It becomes more of a, I can't listen to and purchase 35 people who are now all affiliated with Wu-Tang. Some of this is getting watered down. It's not exclusive to Wu affiliates, right? It's happened with like Rockefeller, right? It took Rockefeller a minute before people cared about anything other than Jay-Z and maybe Bleak, right? Jay-Z was it on Rockefeller. Bleak was second because he'd been there, right? But there were other artists on that label, like the Rangers and just other artists. Rel, Christian. It didn't really pop for the rock bars until they got Freeway and, State Property. But after a while, it started to get really big because now they got Cameron, right? And then they had signed ODB, and they was gonna have Big L, and of course these they had MOP. Of course, these are artists in their own right who have their own fan base, but sometimes things can get oversaturated. And rest in peace, ODB, but ODB on the rock wouldn't have felt like he was part of the family. Just would have felt like he was visited. Right? It would have been that same feeling. Might have been dope, but it wouldn't have been that same feeling. Same thing with Cameron. He felt like a guest. The Rangers, we forgot about them. They never really popped, and they wasn't really bad. Same thing with Mobb Deep, right? Infamous Mob, all these cats, you can like them individually, but at the end of the day, you're there for Mobb Deep. And Big Noid is probably as far as you're really willing to go outside of that. Most people. Again, there are some people who wanted everything that had to do with Mobb Deep, so they mess with anybody and everybody, right? It just happens that way all the time. You get the firm, you got Nas, AZ, Foxy Brown, you know what I'm saying? Nature, Cormega, whichever you want to say in the group, right? But then once Nas starts getting all these other people, I think at one point they had this crew called Femme Fatale, but it didn't work out. Nation, like the Bravehearts. It starts to feel like the product is getting worn down. So my point is basically that I think Nori made a joke in poor taste because he didn't necessarily do his homework on how others feel about these groups, right? I was not a Wu affiliate by everything. I bought what I liked. And the other stuff, I felt like, it's trash. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's the dude from Warriors Drum? King Just, right? First single was crazy. More Wu affiliate, basically. Sort of kind of disowned them, but it was back then we just always like, this is a Wu affiliate. I was all in. Bought the album was garbage. That one song was great. That was it. And it just kind of told me that what I'm searching for with these Wu affiliates, I already have in the Wu-Tang Clan. And all of this is just extra. And again, if it happens to be dope, so be it. Again, I listened to that Sons of Man album recently. Haven't heard the whole album ever. Heard a couple of songs, and I was like, yo, this was kind of dope. But at that time, you talking about early prime Wu-Tang time. I wasn't trying to hear anything but a second album from Ray, Ghost, Jizza, anybody that was a part of that magic from 36 Chambers. That's where I wanted to hear the music. And it just is what it is. And again, it happens on every label, from Young Money to Rough Riders. At some point, there are people who are getting signed to that movement where you're just like, all right, I had enough. And I think Nori just in poor taste insulted them instead of doing his homework, right? And as far as knowing them. So who's to say if he's right or wrong? I'm just bringing you to the perspective that they weren't as loved as you think they were. Wu affiliates weren't as loved as you think they were. A lot of people felt like Nori. A lot of people feel like some of the fans who are upset. But nevertheless, for me personally, as long as he doesn't include Killer Priest and Shaheem in that category, they're good. That's going to do it for me for this episode. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, TikTok, whatever social media, at Vegas World INC. And please know that this podcast is available wherever you listen to podcasts. All you got to do is click the link in the description and hit that subscribe button, and please review on Apple Podcasts as well. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic. I'm a fan. Peace.
Drop it on the random.